Hello and welcome to another episode of Stories from the Toy Shelf Unscripted. And this one is going to be a big one. So big that I will probably have to chop it up into maybe 2 or 3 parts, but we'll see how things go. Anyway, so 2024 will always be remembered by myself as the year that I fell into not just another, but a major rabbit hole. So in case you didn't know, I'm a huge fan of G.I. Joe. I have a huge 25th anniversary Pursuit of Cobra, well, basically modern 1/18th scale collection. I pretty much got almost all of it. So much so that years back when Hasbro announced their new 1/12 6-inch scale of G.I. Joe called G.I. Joe Classified, I kinda obviously hesitated. So the first few waves looked really awesome, but I resisted. With such a robust 1/18th scale collection, I couldn't justify myself getting into yet another G.I. Joe collection. But anyway, you've got this guy out here because Airborne, from the very start, has always been my favorite G.I. Joe. And if you didn't know, I've got a video on it somewhere, but basically when the 25th anniversary line started, I also hesitated in collecting it because back then I was just a pure Transformers collector. But I told myself, if they did release a 25th anniversary Airborne, he's such an obscure character, the chances of that happening would be like close to zero. I would get it just for the sake of getting my favorite character. And lo and behold, they actually did. And so I got one, and that was it. I fell down the 25th anniversary rabbit hole. So anyway, fast forward years later, and the same thing, although I didn't tell myself that if they did get a classified Airborne, I'd get, but they did. They released one, and I went back and forth. I knew myself very well that all it takes is just one figure, and, against better judgment, I got myself my classified Airborne. And of course, you know how this goes. I told myself, I'll just get, my favorites. I'll complete the original 13, and maybe my favorite Cobra. I'll get myself some Firefly, and pretty much game over. But I basically got every single classified figure that I missed out on. Of course, I didn't get everything, but I know what you're thinking. Yes, I did spend a lot in this whole brand new collection, but on the flip side, I did sell off a lot of my 25th anniversary collection, which, of course, surprisingly still went for quite a substantial amount. None of the older ones, more of the Rise of Cobra, Retaliation, and later stuff, but extraneous extra stuff. So yeah, thankfully dipping into classified wasn't too heavy on the wallet. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say, in case my wife is listening. I didn't spend too much on this collection. Anyway, so let's get started with my classified collection for 2024. Okay, so let's get started with my G.I. Joe Classified collection. So basically, these guys have taken over our staircase. These are extensions on the side, which I've used as display space, right? My wife was cool enough to let me display toys all over the house. And so this extra space on the staircase was not spared. Originally, this area housed basically my Marvel Universe MCU collection. So up here, we still have my MCU villains display, which we'll probably cover in another video. But these used to be all Marvel Legends MCU stuff, which I'll post pictures of what used to be here, or maybe I've done it before, but we'll see. Anyway, so the G.I. Joe collection has basically taken over the stairs. And this is just a quick overview of what I have so far. If you're wondering what these stars are, I'm filming this on Christmas, December. And so we've got the decorations around the house. These are, if you're not in the Philippines, these are what you call little paroles or stars, represent the Star of David, which was over the Nativity. And these are made out of Capiz shells. So anyway, it's a Filipino thing. And so I've got them hanging all over the place. And down here, these used to house books, but now they have my Joes. And over here are the Cobras, what I have. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So the original plan was to have each step house a specific year of the line. So down here is the original 82, original 13 with Shooter, who's supposed to be, the 14th mysterious member. But anyway, that's a story for another time. But this is supposed to house the original 13. Over here is the 82 line. This was supposed to be 83, but there aren't that much, so I had to kind of distribute things around. This is 85, if I'm not mistaken. And then, anyway, we'll get to the rest later. But anyway, let's take this shelf by shelf. So let's get started with where it first started. The original 13. So I started collecting G.I. Joe from day one, 1982, with the 1982 line. And just like anyone who started from the start, although these guys aren't the most colorful or flashiest of designs, the original 13 will always have, I'd like to think, a special place in every hardcore G.I. Joe collector's hearts. Well, I don't know if you noticed this. I mean, do any of you guys read Dragonlance? I'm a huge fan of Dragonlance. So this is the annotated version of the Chronicles, which was the first 3 books which started everything. But yeah, right now, it's a tier to raise up some of my original 13 members. But anyway, that's just an aside. So anyway, when I was going back and forth with whether to collect Classified or not, at one point I was just going to tell myself, yeah, I'm just going to collect the original 13. I figured it would be nice to have an upscaled version of the first Joes. So that's how it originally started. So as of now, as of 2024, we've got 8 of the original 13. So that's Rock and Roll, Stalker, Hawk, Grunt, Breaker, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and Clutch. So just a quick overview. And then of course Shooter. So Shooter isn't part of the original 13, but supposedly she's part of the original team. If you know, you know. Maybe I'll do a video on her later on. But as of now, she's part of the original team. At least according to the Marvel Comics. Or was that Devil's Due? Anyway, so we got Rock and Roll, who was never really a favorite of mine, but I think he's gotten quite popular towards the later years of G.I. Joe. So it wasn't a big surprise that he would be released. Then we got Stalker. This is the first release, the darker version. I did debate on getting the retro version of Stalker, which was released later on, which is a little bit closer, it's brighter to the original figure, but I think I'm happy with what I have. I'm not a big fan overall of this specific figure. I think the head sculpt is a little bit too old. But yeah, so I'm happy with this more real-world Stalker. Same with Rock and Roll. There will be a retro version which is closer to the original green figure. So I like that punch of light beige, which I guess is a call to his second version 2 figure. Next up is Grunt. There isn't really much to say about this guy. I originally thought that this guy was the leader of the Joes. He's an infantry trooper. Breaker and Clutch. Okay, so one thing that I was not planning to do was get the vehicles. And so yeah, I skipped on Breaker, the Ram cycle, which Breaker was packed in with. So I just found him being sold for loose. I think there's a retro version coming out of this guy. So hopefully I'll probably switch that guy out switch out this guy for that, because I'm assuming the retro version will have all the classic equipment. This guy's pretty bare bones. I mean, he's got a cool helmet and all, and you can argue that, yeah, you know, maybe all his communication stuff is attached to his helmet now, but something about the original version, so this guy will probably be switched out. The Vamp, I would have gotten the Vamp because the Vamp was the very first G.I. Joe vehicle that I got as a kid, so it's got some, you know, nostalgic pull for me, but unfortunately, it was released when I was not yet collecting, so I missed out on all the pre-orders, and I'm not gonna spend an arm and a leg for a new Vamp. So I'm hoping for a re-release at some point, a reissue, but in the meantime, I was able to find a loose Clutch, right? Scarlet, no brainer. She's the iconic first female of G.I. Joe, and this is the classic version. I was tempted to get the original release of Scarlet, which was a little bit more modern. I actually like that head sculpt more than this one. I mean, this one is fine, but I think it could have been done better. Anyway, so I ended up getting this Scarlet. It's a straight up upgrade from the original figure, and well, you know, it's iconic, right? I mean, she did have an odd design that didn't look very militaristic, more superhero-y, but it is what it is. So yeah, this Hawk obviously is not the original 13 version of Hawk, which came packed with the MMS system, the missile system. That will probably be released soon because they did release the missile system, although the Cobra version. But anyway, so if they do release that Hawk, I don't know, maybe I'll get him. But for me, this is the classic Hawk, right? I mean, this is Hawk as a general. Like I said, when I was a kid, I had no idea that Hawk was the leader because he came with a vehicle and he was pretty unassuming and stuff. So this helps balance out to make the whole original 13 not too green. So yeah, I'll probably stick with this Hawk. Oh, and of course, can't do without Snake Eyes. So maybe I'm in the minority here, but I actually prefer Snake Eyes to be more of the commando than the ninja. I mean, yes, I'm a fan of the ninja Snake Eyes, and I do have that version, or I mean, the classified version of what's supposed to be the ninja Snake Eyes. But if you ask me, I prefer my Snake Eyes to be a commando. And so yeah, well, this was the original release of Snake Eyes, so obviously he fits in my original 13 display. And so yeah, this is what we have so far. far, and like I said, we just need 5 more. You got Flash, Grand Slam, which most likely will come because obviously they're an easy 2 for 1 with regards to depending on a sculpt. And the HasLab Dragonfly came with Glenda, and her weapons were basically Flash's laser rifle. So that's pretty much a no-brainer. Hopefully we'll get his announcement soon. And what else is up? Zap, the bazooka soldier. That's 3 so Flash, Grand Slam, Zap, Stealer, who might unfortunately come with the Mauler. Hopefully not. I don't know if I would splurge on a 1/12 scale Mauler or have the space to house it. So if that happens, I might have to go the clutch and breaker route and bite the bullet and spend a little bit more for a loose Stealer. And is that it? That's 4. Who am I missing? Stealer. Oh, of course. How could I forget? Short Fuse, the Mortar Soldier. So actually, Short Fuse was the very first Joe that I got as a kid. I picked him randomly because he was the blonde guy. And back then when I was a kid, I thought that the blondes were leaders. You know, Luke Skywalker, Matt Tracker. Well, actually, Mask wasn't up then. But you know what I mean? I just associated blonde guys as the leaders of all these, you know, cartoon teams. And, well, became single-packed, unlike Hawk. So I assumed that Short Fuse was the leader, but apparently he was just a Mortar Soldier. So yeah, so Flash, Grand Slam, Stealer, Zap, and Short Fuse. Hopefully we'll get at least some of them or all of them next year, and we will have a complete original 13. Okay, so far this is my 1983 classified display, and this is where it all started with Mr. Franklin E. Talltree, Airborne. So if you know me, Airborne is my favorite G.I. Joe, and he's the culprit for making me fall into this new rabbit hole. So yeah, I couldn't justify putting him front and center, so that space belongs to Gung Ho, who was probably the breakaway character from this wave. There was an original release of Gung Ho, who was a little bit more modernized, which actually, the modernized version was the very first classified figure that I bought, but not because I wanted a Gung Ho. I wanted to use the body for a custom Reaver from the X-Men. I think everyone pretty much did that. But anyway, so when I started getting to classified, this retro version of Gung Ho was one of the harder ones to find. I had to resort to eBay to find him, which thankfully I did. Anyway, Tripwire. I was never a huge fan of Tripwire, but ironically, he was one of the very first ones that I got after Airborne. Why? Because of this dude, the Rat. You know, the original Tripwire didn't have a rat, but I actually thought giving Tripwire a rat was a cool idea because, like, well, I mean, rats are actually used in India, I think. Well, not, you know, your common sewer rat, but these are like field rats or something. They're raised and trained to hunt down mines. Because, you know, their lightweight doesn't set up the mines, and they're taught to move in a grid-like pattern to sniff out the chemicals that are in the mines. So yeah, I thought it was a really cool addition to make, you know, a pretty plain character like Tripwire just a little bit cooler. And of course, a little bit, you know, the modernized padding and stuff like that works out. So yeah, he was one of the very first classified figures I got just because of the Rat. Torpedo, the Seal, Doc, the Medic. Actually, okay, so when I first saw when I first saw all these figures and the card back of whoever figure I got, Doc was actually one of my favorites. It didn't occur to me, I was a kid, you know, it didn't occur to me that he was a medic. I mean, yeah, he was called Medic, but, you know, Medic didn't register me as Doctor. So I just actually thought his design looked cool. But once I found out he was a medic, he just shot down in coolness for me. But anyway, he is a major member of the team, the original Doctor, Doc. And of course, you have Snowjob, who I think has gotten some of the most coolest modern upgrades. I think the first major Snowjob update we got was in the 25th or Pursuit of Cobra line, where he came with a ton of accessories. Basically, they made him a sniper, and he came with like a portable pitch tent, you know, camping equipment. So they dialed it back a bit with this version, but still, this is a really cool version of Snowjob. So yeah, sorry, I really don't have much to say about Torpedo. He's a Seal. He was never a favorite of mine, but he's part of this wave of figures. So yeah, the 1982 line so far. Next, we have sorta what was supposed to be the 1984 line, but we don't really have much in terms of 1984 releases. Duke is obviously part of that line alongside Recondo, the jungle trooper, and Roadblock. But other than that, everyone else is 86, 87. Okay, so Cover Girl is actually part of the 83 line, but I just threw her in here just to balance things out because the 83 line was kind of crowded. So yeah, so Dusty is Was he in this year? I can't quite remember. I think he was in the next year. No, actually, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but yeah, I think he was in this year. Anyway, so yeah, Retro Duke, they released an original version of Duke, a more modernized version. I passed on that, and this was one of the figures that won me over to collect. Same with Beachhead. He had an original, actually hard to find, modernized version that was released over the pandemic, and a lot of the toys that were released over the pandemic were really short on supply. So thankfully, they released a more back to basics retro version. Same with Roadblock. He got a modernized version from the first wave that was based on his second figure. So this is the original, which, the second figure was pretty, I guess you could say it was iconic, but I wasn't a big fan of it. This is my Roadblock. And obviously he didn't come with this gun. This is from, what was this? The infantry, the generic infantry soldier. So I was able to find someone who was willing to part with this gun, and so yeah, I got my classic 84 Roadblock. And then we have Dusty, the Desert Trooper. Always a fan of his. He figured in one of my favorite short story arcs in the comics where he saved. Actually, no, he didn't save. He was buddies with Sneak Peek, who died, and he promised his mom to take home his body, and so he did. He lugged Sneak Peek's dead body across the desert. So it says a lot about his character. And of course, Chuckles, who started out, this guy's from the 87 line, so we still don't have much from the 87 line, so he's parked here for the moment. And yeah, when he first came out, I had no idea what to do with him. Like many kids, we had no idea why a G.I. Joe military guy came with floral shirt and the name Chuckles. He's the undercover agent, and thanks to IDW, this character found new life. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend IDW's Cobra series, where it revolves around Chuckles infiltrating Cobra, and it's a very good series. And it basically catapulted this guy, who I think started out as a joke, to one of the most popular, dare I say, popular members of the team. So yeah, the sort of 84 line. Oh, sorry, and CoverGirl. Yes, if you're wondering, I wasn't a big fan of the original head that came with this figure. It was just really poorly done. So in the cartoon series, her first appearance in the cartoon, she came in as a blonde, long hair blonde. Even if, it was basically just the first series, and after that, they gave her usual dark brown short hair. I actually prefer her as a long-haired blonde just because it visually differentiates her from Scarlet and Lady J. So yeah, this head is from the Marvel Legends Sharon Carter from the Shield 3-pack, and I think it's perfect. It doesn't fit perfectly. It's just there. I mean, I guess you could figure out a way to make it fit properly, but as it is, it works, right? And now I hear word that Hasbro is releasing a retro blonde version. So let's see how that turns out, and we'll see if we'll stick with this one or not. But yeah, so this is so far the supposed 84 version. We should be getting, I think, Ripcord hopefully soon. Hasn't been announced, but the Night Force version of Ripcord is part of the HasLab Dragonfly. So, the sculpt is there, so I'm pretty sure we're going to be getting a Ripcord sooner rather than later. And of course, we have Blowtorch, who has been announced, and renders have been shown. So hopefully this shelf will be filled out a little bit more. So on to the next one. Next, we have the 1985 line. So I think all of these are all 1985 characters except for Tunnel Rat, who again is one of a 1987 figure who does not have a shelf because I don't have enough. We have Chuckles, we have Tunnel Rat, and we have a couple more. So hopefully in the next year, I think Law and Order will be coming out next year. So we will hopefully have enough. But for the meantime, he's squatting here with the 1985 crew. Headed by, of course, the Warrant Officer Flint, who many people prefer over Duke, but I will always be a Duke person. But that doesn't mean I don't like Flint. I think Flint is pretty cool as he is. He's just not as cool as Duke. And I think we will be getting a retro version of this guy, but as it is, I'm pretty happy with what we have. And of course, you can't have Flint without Lady J. I don't think she's one of the better figures, but she's good enough for what she is. Obviously based more on the toy than the cartoon, which is fine, And next to her is Shipwreck. So these guys are Shipwreck is always the third wheel to Flint and Lady J. I mean, the first time he rescues Flint from the desert in The Revenge of Cobra, and Flint brings him back to Joe headquarters, where he starts flirting with Lady J and always since then played third wheel. Great figure though. I just wish they gave us more options for displaying Polly, maybe with an alternate open wing version. But for what it is, it's fine. And of course we have these guys, the trio, the famous trio. Actually, so the famous buddy pair of Bazooka and Alpine, and then who are more often than not joined in by Quick Kick as the third buddy of their trio. But anyway, yeah, never a big fan of Bazooka, but I think they did a good job at coming up with a nice classified version. It really bugs the hell out of me that his Bazooka came in crooked. I know I can probably heat it up, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Alpine, I was never a big fan of this iteration. I mean, the classified version. I mean, it's okay. I just feel that he's just a little bit too, I don't know, round. He could have used the backpack. The original figure came with a backpack, but whatever. Quick Kick is my favorite of the three. I just think that this guy is fantastic. He comes with multiple hand options, and his face is so expressive. And yeah, I mean, I was always a fan of Quick Kick as a kid. I mean, I was Asian, so when I first saw him in the card back, I just thought he was awesome, and he was one of the very first ones that I got. So yeah, this is the 1985 line so far. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit more interesting. So this is not actually representative of a specific year of figures. This, I don't know if you noticed or already. Okay, so first it's headed off by Sergeant Slaughter. It came out in 1986. Then everything else seems to be like a random, collection of Joes. But actually, they do have a connection in that these guys are the Slaughter's Marauders, right? Yeah, the Slaughter's Marauders. Now I think now in the classified version, they're called the Mad Marauders. So these Joes were obviously released in previous years, like Mutt. I believe Mutt and Spirit are part of the 1984 line. Then we have Barbecue and Low Light, I believe, who are part of the 1985 line. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but basically they all came from different lines. And of course, Falcon came in 1987. Who else am I missing? Oh, so and behind this star is Quarrel, but she's just there to fill things up. But anyway, at least these guys, so the Dreadnoks were such a big hit that I think Hasbro tried to replicate it with G.I. Joe, and they gave Sergeant Slaughter his own crew of Renegades, which, I don't know if you're a fan of the Renegades, but I don't think they were much of a hit as compared to the Dreadnoks. So Hasbro basically, I guess, took a step back, and a bunch of previously released and popular characters from the previous years gave them new recolors and dubbed them as Sergeant Slaughter's special team of Marauders. So that's the theme of this step, right? So you got Spirit. Spirit was one of the very first ones I got because I just thought that this classified version of Spirit was awesome. Mutt and Junkyard will always have a special place in my heart as well. He's always been a favorite of mine. When I first saw him in the card back, Joe with a dog, and that original card art of Junkyard really was something else. He really looked like a devil dog. And of course, I was always a big fan of Low Light. He was like one of the more awesome, figures. I remember very specifically his flavored text in his file card, wherein as a kid, he was afraid of the dark, and he had a very traumatic experience getting lost in the woods, and it basically shaped him into what he was in the future, like this really intense, sniper, but night spotter. Sorry. So I've always been a fan of Low Light. Barbecue, I could take him or leave him. I was never a huge fan. I mean, he looks cool, right, in his sort of like futuristic fireman, but he's a fireman, right? Yes, I get it. I mean, in war, firemen are useful, but I don't know. As a kid, I just never found him that interesting. But yeah, I mean, he rounds up this display. And of course, you have Falcon. This is a modified Falcon. Obviously, he's not sporting the original head. This one came with the Night Force version of Falcon. They improved the sculpt of the head. I don't know what happened with that original release, but so that original Falcon, this Falcon came with the same wave as CoverGirl, and they both had really awful head sculpt. So I don't know if that's just coincidence or they just had some dude sculpt both of them, but they were just really awful. So you saw my fix for CoverGirl, and for Falcon, I just got the 2-pack, and that meant getting myself Quarrel as well. So Quarrel is, I think, a European repaint of Scarlet and is another character. I just thought it was cool. So she helps round up this group, I guess. And of course, Sergeant Slaughter. So my Slaughter Marauder display. And finally, for my Joes, we have the Ninja Martial Arts display. So obviously headed by Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. So again, like I said, when it comes to my Snake Eyes, I prefer my Snake Eyes to be the Commando, but this is cool as well, right? I mean, this isn't the straight up ninja version. This is a little bit more modernized take, which I find fine, right? So next to him, we have Storm Shadow, version 2 of Storm Shadow, and him as a Joe. So obviously I got the original Cobra version and he's in my Cobra shelf. But yeah, this Timber member I bought loose because he came packed in with another version of Snake Eyes, which I wasn't really a big fan of because he looked cool, but he sort of had some olive green, elements like his pants and stuff. So I wasn't a big fan. I found this guy cheap, and yes, he's not the gray version that Timber is supposed to be, but the original toy of Snake Eyes, at least the Ninja version, the version 2, came with a white wolf. I mean, Timber was white. They were probably cheapening out on paint apps. So I'm cool with this guy. Maybe if I find a cheap gray version, I'll get him. But as of now, I'm pretty happy with my white Timber. Helix is a newer member. I think she was brought in the IDW run. But she's been paired up with Snake Eyes a lot. So she fits well on the shelf. And of course, Jinx. So another member from 1987 of the Rawhides, but I think she fits in better here. If I get the rest of the Rawhides, then maybe they'll get their own shelf, but I don't know. I just like where most of my current 87ers are stationed. So I was truthfully waiting for a retro version of Jinx, because obviously this is a more modernized version, and I'm not a big fan of the whole arm tattoo thing, but it is what it is, and for what it is, I like this Jinx, and knowing them, they will release a retro version, and we'll see how it turns out. But as it is, I'm happy with this Jinx. Then we have Kamakura. I don't have much of a connection with this guy because he was introduced, I think, in the Devil's Due run. He's the apprentice of Snake Eyes, also the son of Wade Collins, who was a member of the squad of Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Stalker from Vietnam, who has a whole story of his own. So Kamakura has a nice connection to these two. And these two last guys, obviously they're not ninjas, but again, no other place to put them, so they're here for now. First we got Shockwave, the SWAT member of G.I. Joe, who I thought was a surprise early release of the line. I didn't expect this guy to come out anytime soon. I think he was part of the 88 line. He was part of the 1988 line. And although I do like the additional Riot Shield and stuff like that, I still think he came off a little bit too short on the accessories department. I think they just, if I could be wrong, but they basically reused a lot of the first release of Beachhead on this one and thought of it as an easy retool and release. It's cool, it's cool, but I think the original Shockwave had more stuff going for him, like the backpack with a huge knife and stuff like that. But I'm good with this one. Outback. Okay, so this is an odd one because as a kid, I was a huge fan of the original Outback, the Outback figure. I thought it was really cool that the figure came with these actual straps to his backpack. And of course, so this is the Tiger Force version. And I generally stay away from repaints like Tiger Force, Python Patrol, Night Force, although I do like Night Force. But this guy, one, he was on sale, so he was really cheap. And two, I think he's just got a little bit more character. I mean, they did release a classified version of the original design of Outback, but I don't know. This guy just looks a lot better. I don't know. He just has a lot. The original character was a redhead, and this white is just a little more striking. The original one had a white shirt with the word survival emblazoned on it, and I guess you could call it cheeky and cliche. But this tiger looks, I just think it's cool. I'm back and forth. I don't know. If I find a cheap version of the original one, maybe I'll switch it out. But as of now, I'm happy with this version of Outback for my collection. So yeah, these are my Joes. And eventually we'll get to my Cobras. But I think it's a bit much of a mess right now. But stay tuned for that. Anyway, thanks for watching. And I hope you come back for more.